This episode is brought to you in part by the Table Podcast from the Hendricks Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. I'm Darrell Bach, one of the hosts, and I invite you to join us as we discuss issues of God and culture, which includes anything and everything. Listen on your podcast app or at dts.edu/thetable.
This episode is part of a long series exploring how some evangelicals tied themselves to the Republican Party in the 1970s and 80s. This episode will reference a bunch of other ones from the season, but I tried to make it worthwhile, even if you haven't listened to the others. This is Richard Viguerie's Takeover. Last season, I spoke about the rise of Christian fundamentalism through 1925. One of the quotes I referred to often was from historian Joel Carpenter.
Even when fundamentalists have expressed their alienation toward American cultural trends and advocated separation from worldly involvement, the words have been more those of wounded lovers than true outsiders.
There was this trend with fundamentalists of that era. They'd get in front of their congregation and say something like, "The Bible has told us to be separate from the world, and so we should stay away from worldly things." And that could be stuff like the movie theater, television, dance halls, dating non-Christians, and we must warn our people to flee the ignorant, evil world of popular culture. Dress differently, talk differently, think differently. But there was this lingering desire. We don't merely want to flee the culture, we want to be the culture. That's the battle that Carpenter was talking about. While they spoke from their hearts, worried about their children and the future of the country, they didn't just want their family to be separated from the world. They grew kinda jealous. They couldn't understand why the culture didn't look like them. It created a wound. They could put up a big front and pretend that they were okay with being separate. But what they really wanted was to be the in crowd. They were more like wounded lovers than true outsiders. All throughout this season, I've been asking you to carry that idea over to far-right conservatives. Now, I'm going to do that tricky thing and ask you to separate conservatives and Republicans. Because just a decade or two ago, those two things were not necessarily synonymous. You could be a liberal Republican or a moderate until those people were largely driven out of the party. Today on the show, as we wrap up season 6, I want to circle back to the wound to see how it drove people on the far right to literally take over their own party. And conveniently, they left us blueprints to see how they did it. I'm sure there are many trails to follow, but today we're going to discuss just one. A book written by the quote-unquote funding father of the conservative movement, Richard Viguerie, one of the key players of the new right that shifted the GOP. His book, well, the title's a little on the nose. It's called Takeover, the 100-year war for the soul of the GOP and how conservatives can finally win it. It lays out not only the history of the wound, but a plan of how to leverage it. To use it to explain away the shortcomings of the Republican Party as someone else's fault, build outrage, and turn that outrage into justification for a takeover. You're listening to the show that uses journalistic tools to look inside the Christian church. We press pause on the culture wars in order to explore how we got here and how we can do better. I'm Chris Starrin, and this is Truce. You remember Richard Viguerie, right? Of course you do. In the 1970s, when conservatives needed to raise money, they went to Richard Viguerie. His company, RAVCO, was the fundraising center for a lot of the stuff we've covered this season, like the cult leader Reverend Sun Myung Moon, or organizations that wanted to sell Bibles to Asia. And Viguerie and his company skimmed off the top, sometimes taking the majority of the funds raised. In his book, Takeover, he gives us a little glimpse into his vision of the Republican Party, beginning with Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. Before TR was president, the Republican Party had been embroiled in factions.
What we need to do is support business at all costs.
Some people wanted to support big business at all costs. fighting organized labor, imposing hefty tariffs, and pretending that those aren't taxes on consumers. Some wanted a lean government, and others, well, on the other side were people like Roosevelt. He was just the vice president under McKinley until President McKinley was assassinated in 1901. According to Viguerie,
progressivism, or big government republicanism, gained legitimacy through the cult of personality surrounding Teddy Roosevelt, and it became the governing philosophy of the establishment Republican leadership.
This is our first wound: establishing the establishment. A Republican Party aligned not with small government folks, but with big government folks, leaving conservatives on the outside looking in, at the establishment. Viguerie wrote,
Suddenly, no one was sure what the Republicans stood for, and the war to decide that question began.
Viguerie then takes a convenient 30-year jump to Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. But I want to pause for just a moment and point out that there were actually 3 conservative Republicans in office in a row in the 1920s. Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. These guys were business-first, anti-immigration, laissez-faire, high-tariff guys. I wonder why Viguerie decided to skip this part. My guess is, it's not as sexy to provide context as it is to poke the wound. And this is where we rejoin the narrative of the book. FDR! Truly, the New Deal placed restrictions on business, protected union members, and grew the size and scope of the federal government. Wound number 2 for those keeping score at home. This Roosevelt, a Democrat, created copycats in the GOP, within the establishment. Republicans who didn't fight the New Deal. Wendell Willkie, Thomas Dewey, Alf Landon, who the author derogatorily labels FDR Light. According to Viguerie, there was a lone voice of conservatism crying out in the wilderness. We've already met this guy, Senator Robert Taft of Ohio. According to the book,
Senator Robert A. Taft was a man of towering intellect and character who was the leading conservative of that generation.
Who, as it turns out, Viguerie supported as a 19-year-old. Taft was the conservative candidate running for the GOP in 1952, against Dwight Eisenhower, also a Republican. According to the book, Taft had the lead.
However, the Republican National Committee and the convention process were both controlled by establishment Republicans.
So Robert Taft, the hero of conservatives, lost to Eisenhower. A battle among Republicans, the moderates, and the conservatives. This, as you may know, was one of the conspiracies outlined by Phyllis Schlafly's book, A Choice, Not an Echo, that the Republican establishment was blocking conservatives and holding forth hope that they could have a true conservative in office for the first time since before Teddy Roosevelt, if you're conveniently not counting the 3 that they had in the 1920s. Wound number 3. The dealings of the establishment in smoke-filled rooms. By the way, we're only 4 pages into the book. Don't worry, we won't cover everything. Then William F. Buckley Jr. founded Young Americans for Freedom, a well-funded AstroTurf group that rallied college-age people for conservative ideas. AstroTurf groups are those that try to look grassroots. Hey man, take our flyer, we're like totally trying to raise awareness, but are really funded by big money.
Hey buddy, why don't you take our flyer so we can poison more penguins?
Young Americans for Freedom was essentially the Turning Point USA of the 1960s. Guess who was the executive secretary? Richard Viguerie, the author of the book we're discussing today. This pattern of leaning into the wound continued until 1964, when a charismatic, handsome senator from Arizona ran for the Republican nomination, Barry Goldwater. This was a key moment for the far right, which is why I keep circling back to it. Goldwater stood against the New Deal and welfare. Unlike Taft, he saw the need for a large military to ward off communism. He famously thought that we should use nuclear weapons to take the leaves off the trees on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, leading a lot of the country to dismiss him as trigger-happy. But Goldwater was practically worshipped by far-right conservatives.
There he is! Isn't he a dream?
And a bunch of guys who would tie evangelicals to the GOP worked in some capacity on his campaign. All of this conservative momentum troubled establishment Republicans, who, according to Viguerie,
After Goldwater won the nomination, the progressive Republican establishment did precious little to help him and much to hurt him.
he blamed Goldwater's defeat on the establishment. Wound number 4. But also out of this era came a new hero to replace Goldwater. A man who made conservatives very excited. A guy who outdid even Goldwater in their minds. California Governor Ronald Reagan. But first, there was, Nixon. And
Nixon was no conservative.
Viguerie cites a long list of complaints.
Nixon ended the war in Vietnam.
I know we just started the list, but just notice that his first gripe had to do with stopping the Vietnam War. Okay, back to the list.
He readily instituted wage and price controls. He followed the policy of détente with the Soviet Union and opened the door to Red China. He established the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, supported the creation of the Legal Services Corporation, expanded welfare through his Family Assistance Plan welfare reform, signed the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1970, and he signed an Emergency Employment Act, creating government jobs to stimulate the economy. In short, he followed exactly the policies the Washington establishment supported at the time. If Lyndon Johnson created the modern welfare state that conservatives despise by passing the Great Society programs, Richard Nixon funded it and added a lot of government on his own.
Even more wounds for conservatives as this establishment guy does a bunch of stuff they don't like. To fact check a little, the list is flawed. It's not accurate to portray Nixon as a big government guy who continued Johnson's legacy. He also did stuff to strategically dismantle Johnson's programs, like the Office of Economic Opportunity. Look it up. Viguerie wasn't pleased with Gerald Ford either. But we've got a long way to go, so we'll kind of blow past that part. It's a bit of a slog to wade through all the book's praises for Reagan and the jabs at the rest of the GOP. Viguerie just glows when discussing Reagan, building the military, cutting government programs, and spreading fear. It was during the rise of Reagan in the 1970s that Viguerie and a bunch of his friends founded the New Right, a loosely connected group of guys who met regularly to plan the resurgence of conservatism in the Republican Party. Fighting the establishment. They marketed to
anti-communist Eastern European immigrants, pro-life Catholic blue-collar workers, evangelical Christians concerned about the erosion of values and lack of morality in popular culture.
Oh, just listen to that last line one more time.
Evangelical Christians concerned about the erosion of values and lack of morality in popular culture.
This is that group we started the show with today. The group of conservative Christians who looked at popular culture drifting away from them with a sense of longing. They didn't merely want to flee culture. They wanted to be the culture. And they were purposefully targeted by New Right organizers.
In Goldwater's day, the conservative movement rested on a two-legged stool.
Okay, now picture a stool that has only 2 legs. Can you sit on it? Yes. Is it steady? Probably not. I've actually never really liked this image because you can sit on a stool with 2 legs. You can sit on a stool that only has 1 leg if the stool's leg is wide enough. But anyway, it's his metaphor, not mine.
National defense and economic conservatives. It was only when we added the third leg of social conservatives in the late 1970s that we went from getting 40 to 45% of the vote to getting over 50% and regularly winning elections.
This is key. By getting voters riled up by changes in society at large, the New Right and their vision of conservatism took off. They did this by including religious people with large followings, from Pat Robertson to Jerry Falwell and Tim LaHaye and Bill Bright. All of those interests rallied behind Ronald Reagan. Even with a sturdier 3-legged stool, they still acquired a host of wounds. Can you guess what some of them are? We've covered them. One was the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI, which was labeled Star Wars by the media. Viguerie loved this program.
One of the 2 times Ronald Reagan called me while he was president was to thank me for what I was doing to help generate public support for SDI.
The other signature program he calls out? Iran-Contra. When Reagan and his staff illegally gave weapons to Iran and funneled money to Contras in Nicaragua, he and other conservatives were genuinely upset that SDI and Iran-Contra were attacked by the media. And I don't want to come across as choosing sides, but this constitutes a major gap in Viguerie's book. He spends a lot of pages writing against cronyism, government waste, and illegality. SDI is a program that they knew wouldn't work from the beginning, and still spent a lot of money on it. Estimates range from $60 to $100 billion in 1980s currency. Iran-Contra broke a good many laws, cost a ton of money, hardly anybody got in trouble for it, and we gave buku weapons to Iran, the enemy of our allies, Israel and Iraq. So, how was any of this okay? My only guess is that, like Reagan, when they talk about government spending, they generally don't include the military in that equation, which made it possible for Viguerie to portray Reagan as a budget hawk and overlook the fact that he bloated the national debt. Anyhow, I can't go too much further into the myriad complaints of this book. The swipes at both President Bush's, his undying praise for Sarah Palin, and his distaste for Mitt Romney, John McCain, and Barack Obama. That's something for another season. All you need to know is that he blames everything on establishment Republicans and their inability to differentiate themselves from Democrats. Viguerie repeats and repeats his idea that Republicans only win when they draw clear distinctions between themselves and the other side. According to him, Romney, McCain, etc., didn't. In that disappointment, wound after wound, Viguerie finds no room for introspection or humility. Never mentions even one little thing that his side did wrong. Instead, he outlines a plan to radicalize the GOP. Something that, with the benefit of hindsight, we can see alive and well in the Republican Party of today. I'll lay out their plan after the commercial break. While you listen to the ads, why not post on social media and tell people you love truce? It goes a long way. Okay, here come the ads.
What exactly is an American evangelical? Where did the movement come from? And how did it become one of the most powerful forces in American life?
Hi, I'm Dan Hummel. I'm a historian of evangelicals, foreign policy, theology, and related topics.
I'm John Fia. I have written about American evangelicalism in 3 centuries over the course of 6 books, 18th, 19th, and 20th.
I'm Maggie Capra. I'm a teacher, researcher, and I consider myself a forever student of American evangelicalism.
This is the history that shaped a movement and a nation. American Evangelicals, a history podcast.
This message comes from the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. Have you wanted to improve your relationship, but you're running out of ideas, time, or even interest? I'm Krista Harden, the host of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast, and I've dedicated the last 2 decades of my life and career on couples research, integrating healthy faith practices with the best of marriage research and nuanced personality typing. Couples from all over the world are finding more value-centered joy and bringing healthy desire, love, and fun back into their bond together again or for the very first time as they work strategically and intentionally on repatterning their love in healthy ways. Join us on Mondays or Wednesdays to listen and learn more about how your life and relationship can truly thrive together.
Okay, after the break. Welcome back. This is the Truce Podcast. Today we're talking about Richard Viguerie's book, Takeover. And the title is a good place to pick up, because it might lead one to think that the takeover is of the United States. And sure, there's some of that. But the emphasis is really on the takeover of the Republican Party. And as I said, the party had long been controlled by establishment Republicans. Your Georges Bush, Nixon, Ford, on and on, while the Goldwaters, Tafts, and Reagans had to find a way to break inside, pitting the establishment against conservatives. Viguerie writes that there had been talk over the years of starting a third party. But then you have a problem: splitting the vote. For example, if you run a Democrat,
I believe in health care for all,
and an establishment Republican candidate,
I believe it is the duty of the government to foster business growth. That's why we must do away with these high taxes.
the two candidates can differentiate themselves plenty. But if you add in, say, someone from the Libertarian Party,
I advocate for the repeal of the income tax.
when it comes time for people to vote, the Libertarian candidate, more often than not, will get votes that otherwise might have gone for the Republican. This is the argument against third parties that we hear a lot, which is why some have advocated that we should have lots of parties, not just two biggies. Starting a conservative party to compete with the Republicans would likely result in a loss for both, handing victory after victory to Democrats.
That plan sounds good to me.
So when the Tea Party conservatives came into being around the 2008 financial crisis, according to Viguerie, he was there, coaching them not to start a third party, but to engage in a takeover of the Republicans.
It is hard for conservatives to understand that establishment Republicans are the enemy. They are not people who can simply be talked out of their commitment to big government. They must be defeated because they are blocking the path to saving America.
Notice a touch of apocalyptic language there? To save America, they would engage in what he called rhino hunting. Rhino being an acronym, Republican in name only. They would defeat establishment Republicans and install their own people in those seats. But how? Well, this process will likely sound familiar, because it is strikingly similar to how fundamentalists took over the Southern Baptist Convention. They'd use the rules of the system to take over the system. As he titled a chapter in the book,
It's the primary, stupid!
Sorry, once again, I had to yell that because there's an exclamation point. These guys love exclamation points. They're like a bunch of teens texting each other.
Hey, Rick, what you doing today?
What do you think? I'm taking over the Republican Party.
Whatever.
I know teens don't talk like that anymore. It's just fun to imagine they do.
It's the primary, stupid!
It's the primaries. Voters are generally going to vote for the candidates who are on the ballot. You don't get on the ballot for a major party unless you're chosen in the primaries. And yes, there are exceptions. So before you even think of winning,
You first have to win the primaries, dummy. Let's go to the mall and then watch Clueless.
but Viguerie goes back yet another step. Before the primaries, before the election, you need people within the party working as precinct committeemen. And committeemen
And women.
and women not only decide who gets the chance to be elected, they also choose the leaders of their party. In the book, he quotes an e-pamphlet written by Phyllis Schlafly. She was apparently a lifetime advocate of this approach, calling precinct committee people, quote, the most powerful political office in the world, end quote. According to her plan, people at the bottom can erode the establishment from the local level. And Republicans over the last number of years have been very good at spotting these openings and exploiting them. While the elites pay attention to national audiences,
I say, whomever do you think will take the office of senator this great election's eve?
there are people on the local level essentially choosing who gets to play, thereby taking over the Republican Party, perhaps without anyone knowing how it was done. Use the rules of the organization to take over the organization. A bunch of people who've been raised on the wounds of this book,
Taft,
Goldwater,
the Bushes,
Iran-Contra,
establishment Republicans,
who have been told that the country might perish if they didn't act, could come to power and keep marketing based on the wounds. It didn't stop there. The book was published in 2014, before Donald Trump threw his hat into the ring for the Republican Party. Viguerie laid out a blueprint for candidates running against members of their own party. One goal was to say stuff like this:
"My opponent is a crony of the failed big government Republican establishment."
Or,
"My opponent is a big government borrow and spend establishment Republican."
He tosses out suggestions of what people should run against, like the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and public schools. All stuff, if you've been paying attention this season, you could have anticipated. None of the platform issues they wanted were new. Hopefully, through all of this, you can see how the actions of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s paved the way for where the Republican Party is today. Fights within the GOP.
"We want Robert Taft and Barry Goldwater."
Activated guys like Viguerie and the New Right. They then connected big money, the media, fundraising, anti-communism, and low taxes to religious conservatives.
"I believe God has shown me that unless we have a change in America, we have 1,000 days as a free nation."
After ups and downs, sometime in the wilderness during the Bush-Clinton-Bush years, they took aim at their own party. With the bank bailouts of the 2008 financial crisis, they sparked the Tea Party movement. Rather than create their own thing, they adopted a plan to take over the GOP from the ground up. All of it built on wound after wound after wound. That they had been wronged by the Democrats, the party establishment, and the culture at large. We are at the end of season 6. This is the last of the regular episodes. From here, I'm first going to examine what the religious right got from joining the Republican Party. Stuff like homeschooling, cabinet meetings, and constitutional originalism. After that, we'll continue my tradition of wrapping up long seasons with a series of takeaways. Before we get to all that, I just want to make a few things plain. First, regardless of what you think of the current state of politics in the United States, right or wrong, good or bad, it is planned. We, the American people, are being manipulated by our wounds. It is the quickest, surest way for political leaders to wield us like a sword. They do not want us to come together. They want us clearly divided. Second, the Republican Party has not always been like it is today. What we're seeing is the product of decades of work by people from the New Right, the Phyllis Schlaflys, Howard Phillipses, Richard Vigueries, and more. To call it a grassroots movement is to miss the point. Instead, this is all AstroTurf. It is funded by large companies and political action committees, organized to look grassroots. And those companies and special interests stand to benefit from our discontent. Speaking of discontent, one of the stated goals of the New Right is that they organize discontent. They made that plain. Do we as Americans in the United States of America want people actively dividing us for their own profit? Do we want our churches involved in their games? We must be above our wounds. You know why? Because every people group has them. Every kind of person, if they've been around for more than a couple of minutes, is going to have a wound. Someone who attacked us, opposed us, or made us look bad. But Jesus told us to forgive even our enemies. He did not tell us to use their attacks to fundraise or put our people in power. As the old hymn says, they will know we are Christians by our love. To finish that thought, they should not know we are Christians by the baggage we drag around. The point of this season can't be just knowledge about how something came to be, or judgment against whatever you think the other side is. If there's an overarching point, it's this. We Christians need to lay down our pride and start acting like Christians. We need to ignore the marketing experts and return to the simple work of the gospel, loving the Lord and loving our neighbors. In the end, that kind of simple, humble service will accomplish much more than any selfish takeover. Thanks again for listening to Season 6 of the Truce Podcast. I've been working on this for literal years and years. As I said, I'll continue with some episodes about what evangelicals got in the 1980s, as well as some takeaways. Subscribe so you get every new episode as it's released. While you're listening to all that's to come, I'm now busy on Season 7. Please remember me and the show in your prayers. If you'd like to keep this thing going, and it does take a lot of time and effort, especially to read books like Takeover, please consider giving $10 a month to help. You can learn how at trucepodcast.com/donate. There you can also learn how to give via Venmo, Patreon, credit card, check, so many ways. By the grace of God, I'm doing this show full time, which means pinching a lot of pennies. Remember pennies? If you want to help me pay my rent or car insurance, visit trucepodcast.com/donate. Special thanks to everyone who gave me their voices for this episode, including Chris Sloan, Bob Stevenson, and David Linder of the Worship Ministry Catalyst podcast. Truce is a production of Truce Media, LLC. God willing, we'll talk again soon. I'm Chris Starin, and this is Truce.
This paid message is from AG Financial. What if you could take smart, bold financial steps that connect with your faith? At AG Financial, doing business is doing ministry. Through church loans, retirement, investments, insurance, and planned giving, we're creating robust financial strategies for both ministries and families. We're faith allies, serving you alongside you. Connect your faith and finances now at agfinancial.org/robust. Let's take smart, bold steps together.
This episode is brought to you in part by the Table Podcast from the Hendricks Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. I'm Darrell Bach, one of the hosts, and I invite you to join us as we discuss issues of God and culture, which includes anything and everything. Listen on your podcast app or at dts.edu/thetable.